7, and if I could, it is 21 past 12 time now to welcome our special guest to the studio this afternoon on 2FM. We've got David Landini, who's part of the Riverina State group. They've got a meeting, next Tuesday night at Riverina Hotel, and we'll welcome to that. So first I'm going to welcome David to 2FM. How you going? Or to Hay especially.
Yeah, no worries. Well, thanks very much, Peter. It's great to be here at Hay 2 Hay FM. It's very pleased to be here, and thank you so much for allowing me to be here too, Peter.
We're talking about the Riverina State at the moment. Can you just tell us what the Riverina State is, basically, first? It's not a political group yet, though, is it?
What's become more and more obvious over time, Peter, is that the people in the country areas of New South Wales, particularly the area historically known as the Riverina, really needs to separate from New South Wales. So when I say New South Wales, I think it's called an acronym, NSW, of course, stands for New South Wales, but then another definition of it is Newcastle, Sydney and Wollongong.
Yep.
And the reality in New South Wales is that the NSW does stand for Newcastle, Sydney and Wollongong. The people in the Riverina are really not shortchanged in a way, but even worse than shortchanged. There are decisions made in New South Wales by the New South Wales Parliament, particularly in these areas, these irrigation areas and rural areas, where water, which is a huge issue at the moment and always will be a huge issue, is being removed from these areas continually. At the moment, the Murrumbidgee irrigation, I believe, is on 77% of allocation. Earlier on in the year it was only 3%. Now, the area I'm from, of course, is the Murray irrigation area. The Murray irrigation is on 40% of their allocation. Now, water is a great wealth producer for these areas, and if the water is put into these areas, it creates wealth, it creates jobs, it creates a lot of good things for this area. It keeps people in the area, it keeps the schools full, it keeps the shops busy, keeps the mechanics and everyone that's employed in the whole area very busy. Now that's great with water, but if you take the water out, it all goes the other way. And the jobs that were there otherwise are not there anymore. Because the rice isn't grown, the cotton's not grown, the vegetables aren't grown, the livestock aren't grown, and so forth. Now water is only one issue, but it's a very big issue. And we have to understand that the water, there's not a logistical problem with water. There's plenty of water available. And if you look at Hay, the Murrumbidgee River at Hay, it's, I don't know the exact quantity going through there, but it looks 3/4 full to me. Now, that water is there, but it cannot be used. Now, the decision not to use that water isn't made by the people in Hay, or Deniliquin, or Griffith, or any of these areas. The decision not to be able to use that water is made in Sydney, or Newcastle, Sydney, Wollongong. Now, and I will talk on this issue, particularly the water issue, because it's the most obvious issue in the area, but those decisions are made in Newcastle, Sydney, Wollongong. And it doesn't matter what we do, we can put up facts and figures, you can put up what's right, and you can be 100% right in what you say, but ultimately the decisions are made in the major population centres of New South Wales, which is Newcastle, Sydney and Wollongong. Those people have no relationship with us as far as agricultural production. Their water supply and system is entirely separate from ours. We're on the inland, of course, but they make the decisions about what water farms here can have, what wealth can be produced, and ultimately how many people can be employed in these areas. And at the moment, they are saying, no, you cannot have that water. Now, we can all sit here and say, oh, well, maybe that's a good decision, maybe it's not. But you can be assured it's a very bad decision. And you look at that water going down the river and ultimately goes into South Australia. And ultimately, while farmers in these areas can't have water at the moment, right now there's 23 gigalitres a week, and that's a massive amount of water flowing out to sea in South Australia at Lake Alexandrina. And people that are familiar with Lake Alexandrina will know that that's a massive issue in the water problem. But at the moment, while farmers can't have water, while they can't produce wealth, while they can't create jobs and employment and so forth in this area, at that same time there's 23 gigalitres a week, which is a massive amount of water going out to sea. Now that's the mentality, and that's done with the permission of New South Wales. It's not just an accident, that is done with the permission of the New South Wales government, and that's what they are deliberately allowing to happen in these areas. Now, I believe, in my opinion, we deserve better than that, and we can actually do a lot better than that. And a Riverina State will have authority over all the natural resources in the area. Water's the most obvious, but all natural resources, timber, all agricultural practices, and in fact all the wealth-producing elements of a state, a Riverina State will have control, authority over those, and we won't be under the authority of the population in Newcastle, Sydney and Wollongong.
Right, so basically you're going to try and form a political party here, aren't you, with the Riverina State? Is that right?
To achieve the objective to form a Riverina State requires a number of things. It requires basically an explanation of why we need a Riverina State at the moment, and there's a meeting next Tuesday at 7 o'clock at the Riverina Hotel in Hay, and there will be a discussion on the reasons why we need a Riverina State, and there's several reasons, not just water, but water is a big one. And then there will be a discussion on activities that have been done to date. There's quite a bit that's been done to date. There's a lot of information out there that people aren't aware of. The Riverina State Group has a website, Facebook page, an email list, and we hope to add to all that. Now, part of the process to form a Riverina State is, okay, get the explanation out there of why this should happen and why it actually needs to happen. Get the message out there to as many people as possible, because that just simply has to happen. Part of the process of forming a Riverina State, because ultimately it is a political decision, and another way to assist that formation is to form a political party, and the name of that party will be the Riverina State Party. The name will describe the primary objective of that party out front, straight up front, and that will, the idea of that, or the reason for that, is to get a concrete number on this issue. It won't be just merely a discussion between David Landini and Peter Marks in a radio station. No, it won't. There will be elections held, and we hope to have candidates right throughout the Riverina in the next federal election. I think that's in 2 years' time. And the people in the Riverina will have the opportunity to vote and put a concrete number on this issue. And I'm really, really confident that a lot of people will say, yes, this is extremely important, it's necessary, and here's a number, here's a vote that will put a concrete number on this issue.
Yep, I see your pamphlet there. You cover quite a large area, don't you, in New South Wales? I mean, you take out Newcastle, Sydney, Wollongong, and basically your Riverina State's basically the rest of New South Wales, isn't it, really?
The Riverina State, at this stage, the proposed area is all the inland electorates in New South Wales. There's 8 electorates in the inland of New South Wales. It doesn't include the coast and the metropolitan areas of Newcastle, Sydney, and Wollongong. So yeah, it is a large area, and of course in that area, and I'll just go back to water again.
Yep.
That captures all the water of the inland of New South Wales. So there's a reason for that. It includes the Murray River too, of course, and all the water infrastructure, because water is an extremely important issue. And we can see how important water is. It's one of the very important issues. But another thing, Peter, when I go through, and we all go through towns in the Riverina, and Peter and I actually briefly discussed this before, there's a general decline in all the towns in the Riverina, except for a couple of major ones such as Wagga, Albury, and maybe Griffith, but I believe Griffith actually has significant problems as well. And you look at all these towns, and I come to Hay, I'm a visitor to Hay, but I have been told that Hay's population, not so long ago, was about 4,000 people, somewhere between 3,500 and 4,000 people. Peter, you might correct me if I'm wrong.
Oh yeah, look, you'd be going back a few years for that.
For 4,000.
So it could be around probably the 2.5 to 3 now. At a guess, I'm not sure exact numbers.
I think
you might have more information on that.
I think the population now is slightly over 2,000.
2,000.
But back not so long ago, the population was 3,000, and apparently back earlier again, it was 4,000.
Yep.
So that's Hay, but you can look at pretty well any town in the Riverina, Deniliquin, Finley, Berrigan, Moolameen, Warcool. All these towns have actually had a significant population decline.
Is that due to, say, centralisation, where jobs are going to bigger places like Wagga and Albury? To
some degree it is. The state government, of course, and this is one of the, problems, I think, with the democratic system and the domination of Newcastle, Sydney, Wollongong in the state. A lot of the public services are centralised in the bigger towns. And people might say, oh, that's the practical way to do it. Well, maybe it is. But there's a political reason for that as well, and this is probably a slight digression, but politics is politics, and we're in a democracy, and it's very favourable to a politician to be re-elected, to put massive public services into the major population centre. Wagga is the major population centre, not in our electorate, but we do have the Wagga-based hospital that's been expanded dramatically with state government funds. Now that might be good in a way, but the problem with that is the Hay Hospital, for example, will lose services to the Wagga Hospital. Now I don't know, Hay might be the same as other regional hospitals where babies cannot be delivered in local hospitals.
No, that's been for
anymore.
years now. It's either Danny or Griffith for most people that have babies now.
Yeah, that's right. So at the moment, you've either got Griffith or Denoi or Albury, Wagga.
Yep.
But a lot of these smaller country hospitals, their services are taken away. They can no longer do it in those hospitals, and then we see a decline in that hospital for that particular service, and then we get a sort of a whirlpool effect where you take away this service and then centralise it into another larger centre, and then you lose this other service as well, and then ultimately the hospital shuts.
Yeah, it's basically a specialised service you're talking about, isn't it?
Specialised
GPs
services.
there, but obviously when you've got to go away for something other than a general practitioner, you've got to go to Wagga, Albury, Griffith.
Basically,
and for someone like Hay, it's a big trip.
That's right.
You're looking at an hour and a half to Griffith, you're looking at nearly 3 to Wagga.
that's right. Once you start to lose your population, you start to lose those government type services like that. But I'll just go back another step before that. To have population, you have to have jobs. You can't, people cannot stay in areas, particularly young men, cannot stay in an area without a job. Now I will say this, young women of course, they can get married and they can stay in the area, but a young man can't. So if the job's not there, he goes, the family goes with him, and that causes our population decline. Now one way to keep the population up is to get the jobs up. And a great way to do that is to put water on the ground and create the various sorts of crops created like water, cotton, rice, livestock, and all that sort of stuff. That creates a lot of work, a lot of jobs, a lot of mechanics, a lot of fuel suppliers, and then you have your buildings and plumbing and electricians and so forth. It flows right through the whole system.
Yep.
And
You'll find that also we're an ageing population as well, and you'll find that as people get older too, they will move to places like Wagga, Albury, because of those specialised services. They need them later in life.
That's exactly right, Peter. Yeah. Once those services are taken out of the town, as you said, the aged population, a lot of people do retire in those larger centres because they've got a hospital that provides those services. And there you go. And what I really don't like about that is you've got the population loss, you've got the breakup of the families as well, but also the wealth that was earned over the generations by those people. They have that wealth and then they relocate to say Wagga or Griffith, and that wealth goes out of Hay entirely. It was earned in Hay and it goes out of Hay, which is a thing that I think that's a thing that's not really appreciated, Peter. And I really think that's another thing that really an effort should be made to, is to keep the retired people in your town. Because there's a lot, number one, you've got the people themselves, it keeps families intact as well, but also you've got that huge amount of wealth that stays in Hay, stays in Denoi, stays in Mooraleen, and doesn't get transferred to Wagga and those other, or Griffith and those other towns.
Yep. Tell us a little bit about yourself, David. I mean, have you been in politics for a while now or not?
A bit about myself. I'm married to my wife Rose. I live at Walcool, a very small town.
Well, everyone knows Walcool. We played football against Walcool, or
Yeah.
have in the past with the Gold Rivers League.
Yeah, I've played a lot of football at Hay. I've played a lot of football against Hay, and I will say right now, if there's any Hay footballers out there, the one impression I had that they were always tough, physically tough. They were hard to beat on the scoreboard, but they were very hard to beat.
You're talking about 80s here, aren't you? Early 80s?
Yeah, right. That's my vintage. Yeah. I played against. I won't know. I've probably got enough with names.
Oh, you know names. That's fine.
I always remember a standout Hay player was Eddie Redfern. He was a standout player. There was a lot of Hay players who I would know by face and recognise them if I saw them. But Eddie was a very good player. He was a standout player at Hayes, and that's my vintage. Played a lot of football against Eddie. So that was good.
You've got some facts and figures there in front of you too. You're going to
that's right.
run through some of that stuff.
What we want to discuss is what I think a lot of people don't realise is we all know there's a domination of the state by Newcastle, Sydney, Wollongong. We do know that roughly, but if you look at the state electorates in New South Wales, there's 93 state electorates. 71 of those, and that is 76%, are in the Newcastle, Sydney and Wollongong areas. There's only 22 electorates outside of the metropolitan area of New South Wales. So straight away, you can see that there's a political domination in that area, just by that concentration of electorates and politicians. Now that's not necessarily bad, but it is concerning. But another thing that in some of my research that I found out, just out of curiosity, I counted up the number of people in New South Wales who vote for the Greens. The Greens are officially opposed to all water extraction from the river and a lot of, invariably agrees to pretty well all agricultural practices. Now, in the last state election in 2019, 435,400 people voted for the Greens. Now, I'm not picking on the Greens, it's just that this party is officially opposed to water extraction and so forth. But 435,400 people voted for them, and they're regarded as a minor party. Now, in the eight electorates west of the Great Dividing Range, there's actually only 398,000 voters total. So the eight electorates west of the Great Dividing Range, including where we are, Murray and Barwon and Albury Wagga and others, there's actually more people who vote for the Greens in New South Wales than the total number of voters west of the Great Dividing Range. So now that is concerning, because I just want to make the point, and I'll relate it back to water again. Water is not a logistical problem. There's plenty of water there, it can be put on the ground, there's not a problem there. But the point I want to make is in New South Wales there's a political problem. And the political problem is the domination of Newcastle, the population and the politicians in Newcastle City and Wollongong. And to go into a little bit more detail there's a massive green voting population officially opposed to the extraction of water from rivers and pretty well all agricultural practices. So there's that is a great concern. But the other thing I want to point out is, on average, every 5 years, because electorates in New South Wales are based on equal population, and the population growth is mainly in Newcastle City and Wollongong, every 5 years, the country areas of New South Wales lose one electorate and one member of parliament from the country into the city. So there's only 8 electorates west of the Great Dividing Range now, and we effectively have no effective representation in parliament as it is. We can elect a parliamentarian, it doesn't matter who it is. You can send a parliamentarian to Parliament in Sydney and they can say whatever they like, they can do whatever they want to do, but it will absolutely make no difference. Absolutely make no difference at all, simply because it's one vote in 93 and those other 93 or 71 of those 93 voters are not agriculturally minded at all. They are much more concerned about water, what they call water preservation and natural resource preservation than what we are, because we actually make a living out of those things. We effectively have no representation in Parliament. But if you take that, if you follow that loss of one member of Parliament every 5 years and forecast out into the future, there's only 8 electorates west of the Great Dividing Range now. So in approximately 40 years, if that rate continues, it's only 8 electorates. 8 times 5 years is, that's 8 members of Parliament gone. In 40 years' time, we will have something like 1 member of Parliament for the whole area west of the Great Dividing Range. Now, you might say, well, that can't happen. Well, if this trend continues, it will happen. And if we think things are tough now, or if we think we're ignored now, or if we think we've got real problems now, I can assure you, these problems will multiply, and we will have less water, we will have less natural resource management or use available to us, simply because we will not have, number one, we won't have the political representation at all, but the other thing is there's a large portion of the population of New South Wales and an increasing population who are actually opposed to those natural resources that allows us to earn a living. So, in my opinion, this has to stop. Now, we can't stop it within New South Wales. We can't send someone to the Parliament of New South Wales and put all the facts and figures up and say, look, this is really bad and the things you say aren't true. You can send a member of Parliament to do that, and they can do that if they like, but it won't make any difference. And what we have in New South Wales is a political problem that is actually insurmountable. We cannot surmount this political problem. You can send a member of Parliament to Parliament and put all the facts and figures you like up in the world. You can have a lot of farm and local farm groups and local industry groups. They can send delegations to Sydney and they can put all the facts and figures in front of them that they like, but it just will not make any difference because there's a super domination of New South Wales by the people in those areas and the politicians who have different desires and attitudes that we do. So these problems cannot be surmounted politically within New South Wales. So I have concluded, and I do have some experience in politics, which we won't go into right now because it'll take up another half hour. But the only solution, the only way to achieve a political solution is to actually separate from New South Wales politically. And the Riverina State, of course, will have authority over all the natural resources in the area, and that is a huge, huge issue. And then you come to all the other areas of governance that I'm really sure that the people in the Riverina can do a lot better for us without the interference of Newcastle, Sydney, Wollongong.
At the moment, you're a small group. You said you've got how many 40 odd members?
Yeah, 40 members, approximately 40 at the moment. Yeah, trying to add to it. Really want to add to that number. Number one, you've just got to have numbers. We're in a democracy, and in a democracy, for better, sometimes for worse, the majority rules. So somehow or other, you've got to either get the majority or you've got to be able to influence that majority. And to start, you have to have numbers. It can't be just David Landini and Peter Mark saying that's a really good idea.
Yep.
There has to be numbers involved as well, and supporters.
And that's the aim of the meeting at the Riv Hotel next Tuesday night?
That will be one of the aims, probably the main aim. You've got to promote the issue, get the information out there, because a lot of people don't actually understand this, Peter. They don't know these things, which I'm telling people. They can see that there's a disaster on the ground. They can see that there's no water. They can see their town's going backwards, as far as any measurement you want to put to it. So they can see those things, but they don't realise that a lot of this comes back to the politics in New South Wales, and it comes back to the domination of Newcastle, Sydney and Wollongong in New South Wales.
I suppose for people that don't know much about the Riverina State, you're social media active, are you? You've got Facebook, you've got a website,
Yep.
you've got all that, so people can actually just hop online and check you guys out.
That's right.
See what it's all about.
Yep, there's a website page, all one word, all lowercase, theriverinaState.com.au. There's a lot of information there. There's also a Facebook page, the Riverina State, so you're most welcome to like that page and put the Riverina State post on the newsfeed. There's also a Twitter account as well, so we put stuff up there as well. And the idea is to get information out there.
Yep.
There's a lot of, and just one thing, Peter. Now a lot of people are just going into history. It's a bit of a slight digression, but the Riverina State is not actually a new idea. The Riverina State's actually it's a 140-year-old idea, and the original attempt to form a Riverina State was back in 1863. Sorry. And the main mover of that movement was a man named Gideon Lang from Hay.
Oh, yeah.
Hay was, of course, known as Lang's Crossing back then. But Gideon Lang was from Hay, from Lang's Crossing, and he was the main man, and there was a huge effort back in the 1863s to form a Riverina State. Back then, of course, they were colonies. New South Wales, all of Australia was under the colony of New South Wales. New South Wales went all the way to the West Australian border. And then we've had various separations since then. Tasmania separated, Victoria separated, South Australia separated, and Queensland separated in the Northern Territory. But before that, it was all New South Wales. And at that time, the Riverina actually attempted to be separated as well, as a separate colony. But unfortunately, for various reasons, didn't succeed. Wish they had. I wish they had. It would have been a lot better.
In hindsight.
Yeah. In hindsight, it would have been great.
Right, that was April. We've probably got to go shortly. Actually, we've got news commitments coming up soon and a few things we've got to do here. But obviously, the meeting next Tuesday night, River Hotel starts at what?
7 p.m.
And obviously, it's everyone's welcome to come in. It's probably going to be in the bistro part of the Riverina Hotel.
I think it's in the bistro area. Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, it's a public meeting, any interested people are most welcome to attend.
Yep. And obviously, if they want to find out more details, go on the website, go on Facebook, go on to Twitter.
Yep.
You've got a contact number here, which I've got 0427 009 683, so people can give you a call. Gary Clifford is the local rep, is that right?
Yeah, Gary's a very good a proponent of the cause. Gary's picked it up straight away. That really there is a need for a Riverina State. When you look into the facts and figures and so forth and the politics in New South Wales, Gary, myself and a lot of other people have just seen very, very clearly that this is not just an idea of a state with a pretty name. It's actually a necessity. It's an economic and a financial necessity. It has to happen, and it actually will happen too.
Yep.
A lot of things happen, Peter, because they have to happen. And we can see what's going on in our area. There is a general decline in the area. We can see with the water, timber, national parks, all this, a lot of issues. And these things have to happen, and if they have to happen, they do happen.
Right, Dave, all the best with it next Tuesday night and the future of Riverina State. And no doubt we'll see you on the ballot paper in a couple of years' time.
No, thanks very much, Peter, and it's been great being on the radio station.
That's right, it's nice to meet you. You're sort of more as a local, well, cool. I mean, anyone around this area that has any involvement with hay, you're sort of a bit of a local, really, aren't you?
Well, we are. Well, certainly.
Are you a farmer?
No, my parents had a farm, but I'm actually a wool broker. I deal in wool. I sell wool for farmers in the Melbourne wool sales. So that's the trade that I do. And with that trade, of course, I deal with farmers all the time.
Yeah, of course.
And my parents had a farm. I'm actually originally off a farm.
Yeah.
And so I'm very aware of what I call the injustice of the water. The water situation is actually unjust. But also, I know as a wool broker dealing with farmers all the time, I can see the way that affects farmers, and not only affects farmers, it affects me. My business is entirely dependent on farmers. And a lot of these businesses, in fact all of them, either directly or indirectly, are dependent upon agricultural production. So I'm very, very aware of the problems, and I am proposing a solution because I've just noticed, I think we can all say over the years, the facts and the figures and the delegations to different government bodies really haven't been effective. So history has unfortunately proven that.
Yep.
So I think, I've concluded, if we want to prosper, we have to go form a Riverina State, and if we don't, and it will happen, but if worse comes to worse and we don't, I can assure you there's only one end conclusion for these areas. The water will be taken out, there will be more national park declarations and so forth. We will be left to dry out and we will eventually blow away. But it's a very, very important issue.
It is for sure, and obviously you've got a lot of passion for it too, Dave, so all the best with it.
Thank you very much, Bert.
Thanks for travelling to FM, and we'll stay in touch, and obviously if you've got some press releases, we can obviously promote your Riverina State for you, so yep, we'll do it that way.
Thanks very much, Bert.
Thanks mate, it is now 2 minutes away from 1 o'clock, we have news coming up soon on HFX.